Apocalypse now. Reporters of the newspaper Respublika and website Stan are no longer able to perform their professional duties. The longest day. Yelena Kostyuchenko, reporter with Novaya Gazeta, and Vladimir Chubarov, Special Forces Second Commander, Lieutenant Colonel with the Russian Federal Penitentiary System, share their opinion on the Zhenauzian tragedy. The Stalin Park. Imprisoned Aron Atabek, the life story of a poet. Cargo 2050. The national leader's continuous odyssey through space and time.
Vlast KZ на канале kplus.
Hello, I am Asalbek Abdulov and you are watching Vlast KZ on kplus. The talk of the last few days centered around the end of the world. The pro-government media exploited the hysteria generated by the Mayan calendar prediction, although their plans were interrupted by the events scheduled in the calendar of the president. According to the estimates of Nursultan Nazarbayev, Kazakhstan successfully implemented its previously set strategy 2030, and now it is time to move on to Plan 2050. No end of the world for the official media, as it rushed to gather feedback from the working class reacting to the president's new message. It appears that classic saying that all calendars lie sometime is still quite relevant nowadays. Meanwhile, the end of the world for reporters of newspaper Golos Respubliki and website Stan was brought early by the horsemen of the National Security Committee, who searched and sealed their offices on Wednesday. Clearly, at least some of the prophecies were right.
The reason I'm outraged is because this is nothing but real defamation. Last time you've sentenced me for 15 days. I don't mind it if I really deserved it, but I'm annoyed when I'm accused of something completely irrelevant. What kind of attitude is that? In the evening of December 15, the photo of a certain Smagulov has been posted in the social networks. He informed the police against Bakhtjan Torigozhina, the leader of Ar-Ruhak public organization, causing her arrest. At first she was taken to the police station and then to the Inter-District Administrative Court. It took the security forces not more than 6 hours to imprison Torigozhina. In fact, the informer himself didn't participate in the trial. That's how a judicial procedure works. The person who laid information against me didn't even show up. My case easily applies to anyone. Later, the security forces had a short break and officially the Independence Day of December 16th passed without incident. A small group of people were allowed to lay flowers at the Monument of Independence, while others weren't. Those who still managed to lay flowers were later dealing with the police. Please let me through. They won't let you in because the search is underway. On December 19th, at 8:30 a.m., the police cordoned off the Astana office of Alga Party. Security officials didn't allow the filming crew inside the office. Instead, the patrol that arrived on the scene copied ID data of the journalists and asked them to leave. According to the public activist Yerbol Koshugulov, all documentation in the office was confiscated. According to information received, the police was given the order to seal off the office of Alga Party on Wednesday. I believe they will comply using any means. The same day at 9 a.m. the police officers broke in the Almaty office of Alga Party. They took all the office equipment. According to the activist Georgy Arkhangelsky, there were no witnesses during the search. I'm disturbed by the fact that one of the police representatives passed some package to his colleagues just recently because I expect anything from them. They might easily frame us up by placing anything of legal nature in the office. The rest of you please remain here because the investigation actions are in progress. The witnesses are present as well. Around the same time in the morning, people in civilian clothes arrived to the office of video portal Stan KZ. The senior investigator of Almaty NSC Sharbakov, in charge of priority cases, didn't let the journalists into their office. Let me explain everything right away. Only those participating in investigative actions will enter the office and others should remain here. After the 12-hour search, the NSC officers seized 70 folders of documents, 30 bags with equipment, computers, cameras, flash drives, and even journalists' notepads, says the head of production studio Boljan Musirov. They took everything. We tried to argue demanding everything to be legal. However, the investigation team told us that they were going to finish their job first, and then we're free to argue all we want. At about 11 p.m. they finished the search, loaded everything in the van and left. To top it off, the NSC officers sealed off the half-empty office. The search with confiscation at the editorial office of Golos Respubliki newspaper had the same scenario. On Wednesday, December 19th, everything was seized and the office sealed off. The pressure on freedom of speech and the ban of the profession. That's how the editor Tatiana Turbacheva interpreted this incident. They seized even the originals of the constitutional documents of the company which publishes the newspaper. Basically similar to stun, our activity is completely paralyzed. Although we are in a better shape because they only searched the administrative office while the creative team worked in a different place. They didn't search that office because they had no grounds to do so. The same day of December 19, the group of NSC officers arrived with a search warrant to the house of Aliya Turzbekova, the wife of convicted politician Vladimir Kozlov. She was banned from using her phone. No one was allowed to enter the house, and later at 7 p.m. they seal off the house along with all personal belongings and even dogs remaining in the yard. The dogs stayed in the sealed-off house on Wednesday. On Thursday, they allowed me to retrieve my personal belongings and the dogs. I keep my dogs in the car now because I don't know where else to keep them. These are big dogs and it's impossible to keep them in the small apartment. Per official data, a series of searches was launched under the criminal investigation against a politician of opposition, Muratbek Kitibayev, charged under Article 235 of the Criminal Code for organization and management of a criminal group or criminal community. The criminal case against me has been initiated in the summer of 2012. It used to be a part of the criminal case against Vladimir Kozlov, and therefore we share the same articles, including the incitement of social hatred and calling for the violent overthrow of the government as part of the criminal group. On December 11th, the city court of Aktau issued an arrest warrant for 2 months in my name at the request of the investigator. I made it to the wanted list, and this information appeared on the website of General Prosecutor's Office. Apparently, they conduct these searches under this criminal case. They try to use this as an excuse to block the activity of all the organizations that are located in these premises. The day after the raids, editorial teams of video portal Vlast KZ and newspaper Golos Respubliki initiated a press conference. The human rights activist Evgeny Zhovchis emphasized that recorded procedural violations during the searches only prove the fact that Secret Service of Kazakhstan carried out an order. There's no point expecting the law compliance. There is no law and no justice. It is strictly politics. This is a political decision made at the political level and implemented by political instruments, which are the security forces. The week ended with another bad news. On December 20th, the Bostande Court of Almaty ruled to officially shut down the newspaper Vzгляд. The court held to answer the claim of the city prosecutor and shut down the newspaper Vzгляд, including its websites throughout the entire Republic of Kazakhstan. Following the suspension, the editorial staff tried to publish Ne Vzгляд and Vzbryk newspapers in the amount of 99 copies because, by the law, in this case it didn't require a registration certificate and it didn't have to be an official media. However, the journalists had no luck even to pull this. We don't know what's going to happen next, but we won't give up in any case. Filing an appeal is what matters now. The end of the week revealed that the license of Adam Reader's magazine, which wasn't even published yet, has been revoked. The magazine is owned by Gulzhan Yergalieva, whose site gulzhan.org was shut down by a decision of the court early on December 5th. On so-called Clean Wednesday, the security forces managed to clear the editorial offices of Golos Respubliki and Vlast KZ. However, unique journalistic groups continue to operate in emergency mode, while NSC and courts ban the activity. Modern technologies only provide more opportunities for them.
Earlier last week, a very important event took place in Almaty, namely the commemoration of Zhanaozian tragedy victims. People held a moment's silence, read poems, and performed songs while politicians gave speeches. At certain moments, the event seemed to cross the line, as it is hard to explain the following Facebook comments otherwise. When I think of Zhanaozian sometimes, the words of Somerset Maughams of human bondage always comes to mind. It was easy to make a heroic gesture, but hard to abide by its results. I'm thinking that in our case, only one man decided to abide by the results, with the rest stopping at heroic gestures and patriotic statements, while he truly suffers and has no time to joke about the end of the world. It is clear that the message is about Vladimir Kozlov, recently sentenced to 7.5 years, and perhaps the imprisoned activists of the oil workers' strike. Last Sunday, Vlast KZ was dedicated to Zhanaozian tragedy and aired as a live talk show. Let us recall some of the episodes of the program. A local saying goes, sinners from Zhanaozen instead of going to hell return back to Zhanaozen. Yelena Kostyuchenko, correspondent with Novaya Gazeta, begins her next report. She spent 2.5 days there, writing 2 articles that broke through the information blockade. Yelena, how does the official version of what transpired differ from what Zhanaozen residents told you in the first days of the tragedy? Vastly, but the death toll is first and foremost. I spoke with a woman who transported bodies from the square and helped wash and store them in the morgue. She contends 21 bodies were brought there before 9 p.m. when the autopsy room was locked down. Corpses kept filing in at night, so the neighboring room had to be opened. 43 more bodies were brought before morning time. Thus, she personally assisted with 64 bodies. I also spoke with a female emergency room doctor who was on duty in the operating room. She says she was unable to save the lives of 23 people. These accounts demonstrate that the amount of casualties does not correspond with official authority statements. It is dreadful that there is still no complete list. Also, police officers I spoke to then and now maintain that their need to shoot is explained by the fact that they received messages from the square that demonstrators and the youth assaulted passers-by. I spoke with many passers-by and witnesses. I do not have a single account of any violence used against the people. Thus, of course, it is frightening that protesting people were shot. But what struck me the most was that, knowing that it would be hard when I was going there, on the next day, 5,000 residents of Zhanaozen came out for a peaceful demonstration, having survived the shooting and the nighttime scuffles. They came out to demonstrate their preparedness to hold honest talks and investigations. I don't think I have ever encountered such fortitude, and I am very sorry that many have lost this moral courage over this past year, as well as the fact that there were still no investigations over the events. I am very grateful to your channel and other journalists who collect data. You are doing excellent work, yet we still do not know what happened on December 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. It became a habit to label the squad special forces. Based on their actions, do they fit that label? I noticed in the few seconds of this footage that there is a lot of overkill in the actions of these forces. For example, using special purpose gear. When a person fell, instead of attempting to neutralize them by handcuffing or tying him up and removing to the back area, they began beating him with batons with abandon across parts of his body prohibited by law. That's one. Second, I was somewhat alarmed by their gear. In other words, the units used to combat mass riots, as I can see they are armed with shields, helmets, and rubber batons. I noticed those who were brought to the front of the line were geared differently. Their overcoats, hats, and slacks did not look like they were from the same unit. Here they are, armed mixed with those wearing helmets. For some reason, weapons are in their hands. Going back to your question whether we can label them special forces, they may have had that objective initially. Here are the brutal beatings of a lying man, by the way. Special forces do not act that way. No, as you can see, their outfits are different. The shooter was also a civilian. I suspect there were others within the ranks of the unit sent to liquidate the mass disorders who used weapons. I believe the investigation found that one of the shooters was deputy director of the Zhanaozen police department, whose bullet hit Turgambayev. The investigation's one-sidedness motivates people to conduct their own. There was a video on the internet focusing on the number of shooters in the hit squad. This man initiates the shooting from a distance of 35 meters. The man is shooting from 2 handguns at once. Later we see that 11 police officers are shooting their targets. 10 use handguns and 1 an automatic rifle. The investigation has its own arithmetic. Charges were brought against only 5 shooters. 2 minutes and 35 seconds passed between the first and the last shot, Vladimir. In that span, the hit squad walked a distance of 185 meters. How do you evaluate the number of 15 killed at that walking speed and that time span? Considering that there were 11 shooters, which is what I also concluded when I watched this footage separately, let's say even with that amount of ammunition, even without changing the dispenser magazine, given the number of shooters, even if untrained, the number of casualties is not 15 people, especially at a distance of 35 meters. Let it be law enforcement officials and not the task force, but they do know how to shoot. That amount of ammunition inside the 10 guns and 1 automatic rifle, 30 bullets in total, that does not amount to 15 people. There are clearly more casualties. If it was a real special forces, then obviously even official information would present a larger number. As was mentioned here in the studio, the use of firearms is a measure of last resort. In other words, in order to use firearms, we must first deplete all other measures and only then make that decision, knowing in advance there will be casualties, irrevocable casualties. These are murdered people. Use of special purpose, gear, physical force, or tear gas may cause damage or injury, but not death. Firearms, on the other hand, considerably decrease chances of survival.
Процент выживших будет значительно меньше.
No new details about the victims have come around in the past year. The explanation for that must be sought not only in Zhanaozen, where people still fear talking openly of the tragedy, but also in Poland, of all places. Radio Azatik reported that a refugee from Zhanaozen was detained near Zgirs, while website Respublika identified him as Meirman Shawianov, whose family stayed at the Polish refugee camp since early 2012. Meirman is a witness of a murder at the Zhanaozen police station, so Kazakh authorities decided to reach the man through Interpol, effectively making him subject for extradition. Meirman's wife believes her spouse will be at big risk back in Kazakhstan. Kazakh poet Aron Atabek is serving the 6th year of his prison sentence and will turn 60 in January. He was arrested in July 2006 on charges of organizing riots in Shanarag district, leading to the death of a police officer. In October 2007, the poet was sentenced to 18 years in prison, although his supporters believe the case was fabricated.
Сторонники Атабека говорят, что дело было сфабриковано.
I call this park the Park of Stalin. Whenever Zainagul feels worried, she goes to this old park. She associates the monument to a revolutionary with the hard year of 1937. The poet Aron Atabek, the husband of Zainagul, is transferred from high-security prison in Karajal to a maximum-security prison in Arkalyk city. The court of Karajal town sentenced the poet to 2 years of imprisonment in a one-man cell on 30 charges. The violations they accused him of were ridiculous, like the one where he had a beard and that he needed to get rid of it. He was not given hot water, he couldn't even brew tea because he didn't have boiling water. He burned his prison uniform as a sign of protest. Out of the 16.5 years of imprisonment, he spent 4.5 years in one-man's cell. Recently, Zainagul somehow got hold of her husband's writing notes. Judging by the prison writing notes, Aron Atabek appealed to the General Prosecutor's Office. In his prison chronicles, the poet writes about the harsh confinement conditions in colony number 161/12 that he compared with Gulag. One-man cells in maximum security prison in Arkalyk are located in a separate building. They consist of 4 walls, a bed, a table and a chair. All are under 24-hour surveillance. The prisoners are cuffed before they are taken outside for a walk. The people in this prison are habitual offenders and are hardcore criminals sentenced for life. We managed to record a small phone interview with the dissenter poet before he was transferred from Karajal to Arkalyk. Aron told us that he felt normal, although he wasn't too excited about spending the next years in a prison in Arkalyk. He compares to a submarine in Kazakh prairies and despite difficulties tries to keep his spirit. I believe that this is a reaction to publishing of my book, The Heart of Eurasia, or Great Aryan Khanate Altyn Orda. Right after the book appeared on the internet, they started preparing me for a transfer. I was in a similar situation in 2009. That year, my article named Nazarbayev's Rule and Revolution with poems was released and I was sent to Arkalyk. Historic and political essays of Aron Atabek include several chapters. The author thinks that The Heart of Eurasia or Great Aryan Khanate Altyn Orda is a synthesis of history, economics, philosophy and esoterics. The poet writes about ethnogeny of Kazakh people, Tengriism, Kazakh language and current political situation. A separate chapter was dedicated to Zhanaozen massacre. What can we make of those tragic events? There is only one answer. It was nothing but a massacre of the Kazakh people. Massacre initiated by the current political regime against the people of Kazakhstan. In other words, genocide against Kazakh nation. This is an old and mean technique used by the authoritarian regimes. In 2006, Aron Atabek was charged with organizing mass riots in micro-district Shanarag, leading to death of a policeman. At that time, the poet took the side of squatters and tried to prevent the buildings from being taken down. In 2007, the court sentenced Atabek to 18 years of imprisonment.
Я достаточно скептически отношусь к любым юридическим возможностям, потому что здесь нет права, здесь политика. Если есть политическое решение...
I'm rather skeptical of legal ways to resolve this because law doesn't work in our country when politics is involved. If the political decision to free Aron is taken, then the president will grant a pardon. In this case, the General Prosecutor's Office will issue supervisory protest and the lawyers will make an appeal. However, if there is no political decision from above, the lawyers can make multiple appeals and present a pile of arguments. None of that will help. And ancestors Kultegin with Bilge Kagan, petrified as stones on the barrows, were heading to the west, blessed by Genghis Khan. Bakhtiar Albani says that for him, reading Aron's poems is a way of communicating with the dissenter poets. Bakhtiar believes that today Atabek is left on his own. He doesn't get support from fellow writers, much less from politicians.
То, что происходит с Ароном Атабеком, уже который год это все происходит.
Aron Atabek is not getting any support. All of our writers, artists and cultural workers are not doing anything to help him. They do not write any collective letters asking to pardon him. However, they regularly engage in signing some collective letters requesting to rename Astana city to Nazarbayev. This is the kind of work that our creative people engage in.
Где-то хотя бы коллективное какое-то письмо взяли, написали, подписали.
This footage shows Shanarak micro-district as it was in 2005. The squatters are taking over land. Many things have changed since then. Over 300 land plots have been legalized. People managed to get their property back. However, Aron Atabek has been forgotten. It turns out that a poet in Kazakhstan is a little figure.
Next on Vlast KZ. Cargo 2050. The national leader's continuous odyssey through space and time. Stay with us. Vlast KZ will return with more in a couple of minutes.
Главные события в Казахстане. Достоверные факты. Эксклюзивные комментарии. Читайте в Казахстане информационно-аналитический портал «Республика». Чтобы обойти блокировки, воспользуйтесь доменом respublicas.info. Вы окажетесь на так называемом прокси-портале. Специально разработанные канадскими специалистами по интернет-технологиям, прокси-порталы помогают пользователям получать информацию в тех странах, где блокируют интернет-ресурсы. В Китае, Иране, в Казахстане. Вы принимаете условия использования системы и попадаете на страницу информационно-аналитического портала «Республика». Материалы интернет-портала также доступны пользователям всемирной сети Facebook. facebook.com/respublica.kaz. Если вы хотите поделиться информацией, вам есть что рассказать, звоните в редакцию «Республики». Наши телефоны в Казахстане +7 727 273 92 95, в Москве +7 495 621 87 03.
Новости Казахстана на казахском языке смотрите в 21:00 и далее каждый нечетный час. Новости Казахстана на русском языке в 22:00 и далее каждый четный час. Новости Казахстана на английском языке смотрите в 16:30, 17:30, 18:30 и 19:30 со вторника по субботу. Время Астаны. Изготовление и размещение рекламы на канале KplusTV.
Remember when we said that all calendars lie sometime at the beginning of the show? President Nazarbayev himself confirmed this somewhat apocalyptic sentiment by announcing that 2030 is already here. According to the calendar of the head of state, Kazakhstan has successfully implemented the 2030 development strategy ahead of schedule, and it is now time to move on to Plan 2050. Congratulations, everyone.
Hello, do you have the 2030 strategy? Students still buy Kazakhstan's strategy 2030 by inertia, although it can now become an epic saga.
Близок к завершению 1997 год.
1997 is almost over, the 6th year of our independence, which we were strengthening in the conditions of realizing political and economic reforms. In previous years, our actions were not coincidental and went along with two strategies of the president. The year is 1997. Kazakhstan is a young republic in need of formulating its priorities. Those no longer with us are in the Assembly Hall. Nurkadilov Sarsimbayev, chairman of the lower chamber Marat Aspanov, is seated above the speaking president. Nowadays, only Nursultan Nazarbayev's portraits are allowed to be above him. A number of countries found power of will and skill to break through in over 30 years from the stage of poverty to the category of prosperous, demonstrating to the whole world the high rates of development. At the same time, the countries who possess enormous natural resources, as strange as it may sound, with few exceptions, showed quite little or negative growth rates. Saudi Arabia, as you see, Zambia, Nigeria, are also powerful oil-rich countries as Kazakhstan. We must not repeat their experience. The 1997 Nursultan Nazarbayev didn't lose his critical thinking skills, so the Nazarbayev of the past can be considered in opposition to the Nazarbayev of the present. It was such a fundamental document in the main development strategy. Right now, statements that it practically depleted itself are confusing. I'm talking about the objectives it set. I would not say we achieved everything it enumerates 18 years in advance. The higher oil prices went up on the global market, the more did Kazakhstan's government roll new programs. Over the last decade, Nursultan Nazarbayev and his team offered their own fantasies more creative than 20th century fox. Let us go over them on a name-by-name basis. No one and nothing is forgotten. Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, 50 Competitive States Program. Episode 3, Revenge of the Siths, Village Development Program. Episode 4, New Hope, 100 schools, 100 hospitals. Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, 10 strikes on corruption. Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, New Kazakhstan and a New World. Perhaps we should take a closer look at Nursultan Nazarbayev's 2007 program speech, New Kazakhstan and the New World. It was a jubilee address since the passing of 10 years after adopting the 2030 strategy. The strategy of Kazakhstan 2030 provided a reliable basis for our further progress. We have all reasons to move forward even more successfully, and we will not miss our historic chance. For this, we selected a path of speedy, all-rounded modernization of Kazakhstan. This is the only right vector of our further development. Nazarbayev made this address in February and parliamentary elections were expected in August. The opposition united in the For a Fair Kazakhstan bloc battles for the legislative seats as well. Nursultan Nazarbayev made many promises in that program speech. We need to continue working on further enhancement of the compensation system for public sector employees. The general need of assets to increase the listed social payments in 2008 will be around 108 billion tenge. We hear these addresses every year. When will we hear the reports? Our entire system is built on reporting to the president, but he needs to be accountable to someone too. It is clearly stated in the constitution that the main source of power is the people. Accordingly, the president must report to the people, and I'd like our authorities to do just that once. Walt Disney Studios bought the rights to film the 7th episode of Star Wars. The feature film will hit the box office in 2015. In the meantime, Akorda Disney presents.
Қазақстан Республикасының президенті елбасы Нұрсұлтан Назарбаев.
Episode 7, Strategy 2050.
Уважаемые казахстанцы, чтобы достойно принять новые вызовы,
Dear people of Kazakhstan, in order to decently face the new challenges, we have to widen the horizons of strategic planning. Today I will only mention the main points of the strategy 2050. Different plans will be developed for each decade to complete the upcoming new 7 priorities. First, economic policies of the new course. This speech on grandiose victories was made in the new Astana Opera Theatre. Nazarbayev's 2050 program speech was the first and so far only address on an academic stage. There are no other productions scheduled for December. Dear people of Kazakhstan, in the 21st century, within the framework of our strategy, we have to take into account the new global challenges. The first challenge is the multiple acceleration of the progress. The world entered the era of global mega changes. The 10th challenge, the threat of the new wave of world crisis. In 2013 and 14, the global economic system might fail yet again. In particular, collapse of world prices for raw materials can quite negatively affect us. Thus, we have to be ready, understand all these challenges and know how to prevent them and turn the situation in our favor. I would not look that far ahead. Maybe these threats will subside, maybe not. Chances are slim. I think those who wrote the strategy were in such an aggressive mood that they feel some sort of a threat. The legendary director George Lucas commented on the sale of his long-standing project with the following: "It is time to offer Star Wars to a new generation of cinematographers. I always believed Star Wars would outlive me and decided it is very important to make that transfer in my lifetime." In modern-day Kazakhstan, statements like that sound like the movies.
This was Vlast KZ on K+. Trends, highlights, personalities of the past 7 days. Goodbye.